My sister dressed all 7 of her bridesmaids in stunning lavender gowns, but when she handed me my garment bag, everything inside was completely different. Waiting for me was a blinding neon orange dress in a size 2XL. I wear a standard small. That was the only option remaining, she told me, her smile dripping with satisfaction. When I pushed back, my parents immediately shut me down and accused me of overreacting. The entire setup was deliberate. They wanted me to walk into that high society gathering looking absolutely absurd, but their scheme collapsed on itself in the most spectacular way. During the reception, the groom's legendary grandmother, the commanding matriarch of an old money billionaire dynasty, walked straight past my glowing sister without a second glance and headed directly toward me. She clasped my hands in front of every camera in the room and spoke 6 words that sent my sister running from her own wedding in tears. My name is Elena. I'm 24 years old and I work as a landscape architect based in Boston, spending my professional life converting neglected, forgotten spaces into extraordinary living environments. Creation has always been my refuge, a necessary outlet given how turbulent life at home has always been. For as long as memory serves, I have occupied the role of the family outsider. My older sister Sienna operated on pure competitive fuel, driven by deep insecurity and an obsessive need to hold every room's undivided attention. To Sienna, life functioned like a performance stage, and she was the only one permitted to stand in the spotlight. Everyone else, especially me, existed merely as background noise. The rivalry between us reached an entirely new intensity the moment Sienna got engaged to Julian Vance. Julian came from a storied, deeply traditional old money household, whose family name carried enormous weight throughout elite social circles. For Sienna, securing this engagement felt like finally claiming the grand prize she had spent her entire life chasing. But rather than bringing her contentment, the approaching wedding only fed her need to control, manipulate, and diminish those around her. She weaponized every aspect of the planning process to quietly chip away at my confidence and erase my accomplishments from any conversation. My professional growth and creative achievements were treated as personal threats to her narrative. As far as she and my parents were concerned, I needed to be brought down before the distinguished Vance family witnessed anything that might shift attention in my direction. The trap was deliberately sprung on the afternoon Sienna gathered all 8 bridesmaids for the final dress reveal. The boutique hummed with a carefully manufactured energy as the other 7 women emerged from the fitting rooms, looking absolutely radiant in custom-tailored lavender silk gowns, each one flowing with effortless sophistication. Sienna soaked up every compliment, making sure the moment was fully documented across every social platform. Then she pivoted toward me with a razor-sharp grin and passed me my garment bag. When I unzipped it, the air left my lungs. Inside hung a shapeless, violently orange dress in a size 2XL against my standard small frame. The fabric was a rough, inexpensive synthetic that clashed entirely with the refined silk surrounding it. Sienna immediately performed shock, widening her eyes and claiming the boutique had committed a terrible shipping error, leaving this disaster as my one and only option. She suggested I simply be thankful for my inclusion. When I challenged the blatant sabotage and pointed out how ridiculous the combination would look standing at the altar, my parents surged to her defense without hesitation. My mother accused me of selfishness and attention-seeking, demanding I absorb the humiliation without complaint. What my family failed to understand as they watched me leave carrying that garment bag was the magnitude of their miscalculation. They were convinced they had successfully cornered me into becoming the punchline of an elite social event. What they had conveniently overlooked was that while landscape architecture was my profession, my university years had been equally consumed by the study of historical fashion and premium textile construction. I had developed a thorough understanding of draping mathematics and structural tailoring techniques. Rather than dissolving into anger or grief, I carried that oversized neon disaster directly to my private design studio. When the fabric was spread across my cutting table, I did not see humiliation staring back at me. I saw possibility. Working in a state of complete creative immersion, I spent 3 consecutive days methodically disassembling the entire garment, stripping it back to its raw components. Drawing on every tailoring skill I had quietly developed, I completely reimagined the structure from the ground up. What had been a shapeless, oversized tent gradually became a breathtaking, asymmetrical avant-garde creation, featuring clean, angular pleating and a bold architectural silhouette worthy of an international runway. I had taken their calculated insult and refined it into an undeniable artistic statement. I kept the finished piece entirely concealed until the very last moment, allowing my family to carry on believing their plan had succeeded. When the wedding morning finally arrived, the historic cathedral was filled with hundreds of wealthy, socially prominent guests representing the highest tiers of the city's elite. Following the instructions I had been given, I arrived at precisely the last possible moment, deliberately avoiding the pre-ceremony photographs where Sienna had anticipated watching me mortify myself. When the cathedral's heavy doors swung open for the bridesmaid processional, a visible current of murmuring immediately moved through the assembled congregation. I stepped forward onto the long aisle, and every pair of eyes in the building found me instantly. Rather than shuffling forward in a shapeless orange disaster, I moved through that space like someone who had been designed for exactly this moment. The rich, fiery fabric fell perfectly around my frame, the dramatic asymmetrical pleats catching and releasing candlelight with every step. I commanded that enormous space without violating a single wedding formality. From her position at the altar, Sienna watched me approach, and the precise moment her confidence disintegrated was entirely visible. Her grip tightened around her bouquet as her expression crumbled, her face flooding with color as the full weight of her backfired plan settled over her. Rather than engineering my humiliation, she had accidentally constructed the most radiant entrance of the entire ceremony. Every camera in the building tilted away from the altar. For the remainder of the ceremony, the room buzzed quietly with admiration. At the grand reception that followed, the ballroom fell into a respectful hush as the Vance family matriarch made her entrance. Eleanor Vance was a formidable figure, the ultimate authority over a billionaire old money estate whose personal endorsement could redefine someone's entire social trajectory. Sienna's eyes lit up the moment Eleanor appeared. Temporarily abandoning her fury, she rushed across the polished floor to welcome her new grandmother-in-law, pulling Julian along with her. Eleanor, however, did not pause. She moved past the beaming bride as though she were part of the wall, her sharp and perceptive gaze already fixed on the vivid orange gown across the room. She walked directly toward me, pulling every eye in the ballroom along with her. When she reached me, her fingers gently explored the intricate fabric, tracing an uncommon draping technique with quiet recognition. A subtle, knowing smile crossed her face as the connection crystallized. The previous winter, an anonymous textile designer had undertaken a sensitive and highly confidential project restoring priceless centuries-old historical tapestries belonging to the Vance family's private estate collection. That anonymous designer had been me, working beneath a professional pseudonym. Eleanor raised her eyes to mine, took both of my hands firmly in hers before every camera in the room, and delivered 6 words that rang across the silent ballroom with devastating clarity. "You belong in our family, dear." She then addressed her surrounding circle directly, announcing that the gifted anonymous designer she had been quietly seeking throughout the entire year had been standing in front of her all along, possessing more genuine refinement and brilliance than anyone else present. The public declaration shattered Sienna where she stood. Eleanor's open and enthusiastic praise felt like a direct verdict against everything Sienna had spent the evening trying to orchestrate. Confronted with the reality that the Vance family's most powerful figure had openly celebrated her supposedly inferior sister in front of the city's entire elite, Sienna lost all composure. She erupted into a full, unrestrained breakdown on the dance floor, screaming at her new husband and physically pushing our parents aside when they moved to intervene. Within moments, she gathered her bridal train and fled her own reception in complete breakdown, leaving the high society event in absolute disarray behind her. My parents, burning with public embarrassment, immediately turned their fury on me, their expressions contorted as they began assigning blame for the collapse of the evening. But before the first sentence had finished leaving their mouths, Julian and Eleanor stepped forward together, their combined presence immediately silencing every word. Julian stated plainly that he would not stand for any disrespect directed toward the woman who had brought genuine artistry and honor to their family name. My parents stood motionless, the full weight of what they had done settling over them. In trying to shield Sienna's cruelty, they had permanently alienated the very billionaire family they had been desperately trying to impress. The wave of applause that rolled through the surrounding guests made the extent of that defeat unmistakable. I looked at my parents' stunned and wordless faces, then at Julian and Eleanor, whose expressions carried something I had rarely seen directed at me from any family figure: genuine respect. For 24 years, I had quietly absorbed systematic cruelty from the people who were supposed to protect me. That evening, the entire structure of that dynamic shifted permanently. I thanked Eleanor sincerely for her recognition, turned away from my parents' desperate, searching looks, and walked out of the venue into the cool night air without offering a single word toward repairing the disaster Sienna had entirely brought upon herself. The consequences of that evening extended far beyond the night itself. Sienna's marriage began under enormous strain because of her own volatile behavior, and she found herself quietly excluded from the major social gatherings she had spent her life coveting. Meanwhile, Eleanor extended a formal offer of a substantial, multi-million-dollar contract to oversee a complete textile redesign across the entire Vance estate portfolio, launching my design career into dimensions I had never anticipated. That night became the living proof of something I had always quietly believed. Genuine talent and true resilience cannot be buried by another person's envy. Given enough time and the right moment, they will always find their light.